Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Abbie Richie. I am the host here and the founder of Senior Savvy, which helps older adults with technology. We have a great show prepared for you, and I'm so glad that you're here. But before we launch into it, I want to go ahead and run the intro. Welcome back to Tech Tuesday. I want to go ahead and introduce my guest today. We've got Danielle Duplin. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Abbie. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thrilled. Danielle is the president of FreeWind Productions, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I want to give you a little bit of a background of how I came to know Danielle and why she's here today. And so I met Danielle at CES. I didn't actually meet her. I was admiring her at CES, and because she was interviewing and moderating panels for the AARPH Tech Collaborative. And so I want to know more about what you're doing and your impact working with the collaborative. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us what's going on, what you're working on, please.
Well, thank you, Abbie. And CES was such a delight and a joy because we had an opportunity as a community of innovators who are working in this field to design products and solutions and services for aging and longevity. We had an opportunity to showcase that work at like one of the biggest venues for techies and solution seekers in the world. And that's our goal, is to elevate this category of innovation right there with biotech, med tech, clean tech, right? So it is a topic that we want to attract the very best and brightest in the world. The world is living longer, but are we aging better? You know, if we work together, we can make that a reality. So it's a pleasure that you were there. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it was impressive for sure. And, you know, when Danielle and I were talking about the topic here, she mentioned something that I think is so pertinent to this space. And that is when you're designing your tech innovation, your product, you got to fall in love with the person who it's going to benefit. Right, Danielle?
Indeed. And, this category of innovation is no different than any other category in that, of course, you've got to build solutions with rock solid engineering that's based on good research and really has good business economics that support it and so forth. Yes. And you want to design with love, because we are designing for people at perhaps one of the most vulnerable times of their lives. We are designing for the people who care for them and love them. We're designing for your community, the senior living operators who are working at the scale level, right? And trying to provide a beautiful living experience for hundreds, if not thousands of people. And we are essentially designing for our future selves. So it is so important that we treat this category of innovation with engineering and with love and deep respect for the people who are going to be using our products and services in the field.
Right, absolutely. And before we move on, I want to just say thanks to our sponsors today. Today's show is brought to us by Fynn. And Fynn is a senior living comprehensive platform that really does help communities. And if you want to learn more about Fynn, you can go to their website at fynn.io. Thank you, Fynn. And, it's Danielle, it is telling because there's so often, I was talking with Steve Moran and he was saying, and we've had this conversation so many times, that people who are selling products and services to older adults, they are living at senior living communities, haven't actually ever been inside the community,
Yeah.
And they've got this product. They love the product, but they don't love who they're serving. They don't know who they're serving. And this happens so often when I'm talking with people and people reach out to me and they want to talk about their solution. And I'm wondering to myself, have you ever been inside a senior living community? Do you know what's already there and what's available and how you can actually serve these people? Because I'm finding that a huge disconnect.
Well, in fact, that's why we want to have these conversations, right? We want to make and broker the connections between innovators who are really, come to this work generally from a lived experience, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they were caring for their own parents, or maybe they're an older entrepreneur themselves and they experience something. They say, I want to fix this,
Yeah.
or right, so you have sort of maybe this N of one use case.
Yeah.
So we want to broker these connections so that, yes, we want to hear from senior living operators. What are your unmet needs?
Mhm.
What would be a qualified lead? You're probably getting phone calls every day from folks who are saying, hey, I know how to solve your problems, but like, how do we create pilot opportunities so
Mhm.
that you could invite some of these innovators in at a small scale, do a lot of that field testing,
Mhm.
with not only the older adults who might be using the product or service, but for, let's say, the caregivers who have to be part of the delivery of that, or for you as the administrator, or your team of, physicians, or personnel who are caring for the whole person. Like, because these innovators do want to know. They don't want to run out of time, money, resources, right? Like, they want to solve the problem for real. So how can we create more empathy and opportunities for people to learn?
Yeah, there have been, and you mentioned it just a little while ago, it's usually, you have this experience with your parent or your grandparent where you're helping them in this transitional time of life, and you find that something is absolutely missing. And that was the question I walked around to all of the different H tech companies in the collaborative that were represented at CES. And I asked them, what's your story?
Yeah.
I want to hear about your story. What's your story? And so, and many of them said, like, for instance, Duncan from Camino said, he had this experience with his father, and Camino is the world's first smart walker, right? And he just saw how clumsy the traditional walker is, and that it's not gathering any data or intelligence. No one wants it around. But so he wanted to redesign this piece of, of medical device that people often get after they fall, and just make it so much smarter.
Indeed. And when you look at that, that's a great example of great engineering
Mhm.
and designed with love. Why?
Mhm.
Because that Camino Walker is super cool. Like,
Mhm.
nobody's going to be embarrassed, using that walker. In fact, you look at their marketing, it's all about like, you're going to need some new shoes because you're going to get out there and do the things that you love more often. Right.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that's exactly the essence of what we're, talking about here. And I think
Mhm.
too, that when you have that N of one motivation getting into the field, go out and get as much research as you can so that it's backed up, with a lot of academic rigor, right? So
Mhm.
that you do design for the masses, right? Because to make a business out of it, you've got to design for scale. So
Right.
one example is a company that was in my community agency. It's called WatchRx, a smart watch that was designed by an engineer here in Boston whose mother was in India, 8,000 miles away. And she had, walked away from her home. She was wandering. And forgetting to take her meds. And so the founder designed, she says, I'm a techie. I'm going to design a smartwatch with, geofence, wandering alerts, and so forth, and medication reminders. But as we know, a lot of people won't take their meds.
Yeah.
And compliance is a huge issue. And so you want to get behind it. Like, what's the psychology of that? Well, the psychology is related to shame.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to take the meds because then I'll feel or look, it'll make me feel old or sick, right? So what did she do? Design with love. She
Yeah.
built the reminder to have the voice of the
Mhm.
grandson. So
Mhm.
now you could record the grandkids' voice, Grandma, take your meds. And
Mhm.
that's what comes out of the watch, right? So suddenly it becomes this act of joy. Like, I'm doing this for my family, right?
Mhm.
So good technology combined with good empathy matters.
Love it. I love it. I got chills just thinking of it. So that's great. The other thing too is that these devices are often, they're only as good as the person who's using them, right? So if
Yeah.
they're not going to use them, it's not any good.
Yeah. And I think too, that's where we say there's a couple of key principles here. One is designed for style and not for stigma. Just as you
Yeah.
mentioned with Camino, that is designed for style, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a company called Sweet Mobility, and it seems so, like this one thing where they were designing fashionable cane wraps.
Yeah.
And you say, well, how important is that? Well, turns out it's really important.
Okay.
So a fashionable cane wrap, it's a husband and wife team. So the husband, he was a fashion shoe designer. So we all know how people love their athletic shoes and how important that is for your status. And she was an occupational therapist who did her master's thesis on the shame of using a cane. And if you're afraid, ashamed of using your cane, then you might not go out to lunch with your friends, or you'll start to self-isolate, right? And so that's the issue that we're trying to solve. So when you make like a piece of assistive equipment or adaptive clothing or adaptive device, you want to make it fashionable and fun so that there is no shame, and there, it really will help with that internal psychology about self-isolation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, I know that you have a couple of steps and a process in which you teach, and I would love to know more about that. I feel like you just touched on one. Is that right?
Yeah. So we say definitely design for style, not for stigma. The second is solve for possibilities, not just problems. So what this means is appeal to the user's like highest purpose, right? And again, that takes a lot of love, a lot of generosity, right? So if we think about, so there's this great company called the Long Distance Grandparent. Carrie Burns, she's the founder, out of Canada. And so when you're living far apart from your grandchildren, like it's really hard to think about how can I be the grandparent that I was raised by potentially, with Sunday dinners or whatever, right? So like when you're living really far apart. So she's got this whole technology platform that with games and puzzles and interactions and ways to help you have this beautiful, loving relationship across the distance. And so it's beautiful in that, the technology is supporting the human desire to be this loving grandparent for your grandchild. There's the Labrador. We showcased this at CES. It's a robotic butler that scurries around your house and has all these shelves on it. So it's not like a butler that's going to do things for you.
I will say I was so impressed when I saw Labrador in person. I was blown away. Like I've seen it and it's been mentioned, but then to see it at CES in person, it is truly a beautiful piece of technology that you would be proud to have in your home.
Exactly. And so if you think about back to that situation where you say like, I'm the grandparent and I want to invite the family over for Sunday dinner, but I'm having a hard time carrying all those, the good china, out of the china cabinet, over to set the table. So maybe I won't invite everybody out to my house. Maybe we'll go out to dinner instead, right? Well, Labrador, you could place all the plates right there on the Labrador robot. It scurries over to the dining room table, and then you can just take the plates and put them right on the table. So you still get to be your whole self. You just have, this little assistant that's helping. The one that I've just recently come across that actually, I got to say, just made me cry, was the Abbie feeder.
What is it again?
It's Abbie feeder. It's like a robotic arm. So it's 4 trays of food, and it's an arm that through AI and all this great technology is trained to find your mouth, and it could scoop and feed feed the person. It can perfectly, aligned with, your stature. So for people who may have difficulty feeding themselves, perhaps they're with arthritis or maybe like a degenerative disease or whatnot, but it's a tabletop device that, so you could sit at the head of the table and still be the head of the family, and have your meal with everyone else, and you're being fed, but you're eating and enjoying the conversation along with everyone else. It's like an equalizer. And so again, great engineering that's built into it, but it's designed with love and appeals to the person's highest purpose of who they are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a quick moment and just thank our sponsors for today. Our sponsor today is Fynn.io, Master of the Art and Science of Successful Senior Living with Fynn's comprehensive senior living platform. And we're going to take just a second to hear from them.
You can invest a lot of money and continually hire care staff, the best that you can possibly find. But if they become frustrated or if they don't have access to the right information to do their job well, they're very likely going to move on to another location. So if you can give them an environment where all the information that they need is readily available and they're rewarded for doing a good job, recognized for doing a good job, and they feel personally valued at that job, then they will stick around. They will perform better. They will build better relationships with the residents and the resident families, and you will ultimately have a better living situation.
That is so valuable. You know, there are a lot of technologies that have come out in the past couple of years that really reinforce the ever-growing issue of staffing, right?
Yes.
And so anytime you can support that in a senior living community, it's so helpful. Danielle, did we cover all the topics, or are there a couple other pointers here?
Yeah, well, let's talk about staffing too, because that is 100% an area that innovators are really trying to help, which is to create the kind of technology that could be helpful for caregivers, whether it's in the home, one-on-one, let's say family members who really caregiving isn't necessarily their profession and they're doing this out of love and so forth. And so they need a lot of help understanding this role, to caregivers in congregate care facilities or settings where you're caring for lots and lots of people, and so how to create how to blend high touch with high tech. And this category, I love hearing this like out of Amazon too. They're calling it ambient tech. We're hearing this in the smart home category. We're hearing it in smart senior living categories where can you trick out a room with enough sensors, to be helpful, like to know movement patterns and sleeping patterns and toileting patterns and falls, detecting falls and so forth. Smart beds, there's smart devices everywhere that are constantly throwing off data and alerts, and ways to help make the caregiving, logistics, if you will, just more efficient, so that when the caregiver and the resident or the person, that interaction could be as high touch as possible. One of the examples that I think is like an iconic example is in the area of incontinence. We all know that this is, a point which, could be filled with shame, and nobody really wants this. And it's certainly something that could be self-isolating. If you feel like you're not, you don't want to go out because you're afraid. And so we love to see like the advancements in materials science, for instance, that are making fabric more absorbent. So it's a little bit more comfortable, but we still haven't quite solved the problem. Now we're seeing undergarments that have sensors built in, so wetness sensors. Okay, so that's getting us closer to a solution, right? So that a caregiver station, let's say, congregate care setting could know across the population that they're covering who might need some help. But we still haven't gotten close enough to the answer. The one that I love, again, designed with love, is the sonar bladder sensor, which is this device that attaches to you that detects before you have to go. Okay, right? Right. And it has an app, so and then can go to the care station so that you can know. So now you can imagine a caregiver interaction. If you only have 10 minutes to spend with a resident, instead of that 10 minutes being maybe changing, an undergarment and doing some cleanup, it could be, oh, let's go and let's say, oh, let's just take a walk to the toilet. Let's play a game of checkers before you go. So even just to make the interaction easier, but also to do more preventative activities so that interaction could be just more high touch.
Yeah, I love that. I have a whole running list of things I'm writing down. I'm learning so much from you. What are some other points of connection that you work on so that startups are able to really create products with love?
Yeah, so that goes back to a lot of the events that we're hosting, and a lot of the pitch fests, and being at CES, being at the health conference, doing webinars, throughout the month and the year, because we do want to showcase these ideas. Many of them are signals of what's possible, and actually represent some breakthroughs in either technology breakthroughs, because they're using, let's say, like AI or advanced, emerging tech in a unique and clever way. But also because it's a little bit of a cultural breakthrough signaling. One great example is Care Coach. So this is, it's a digital avatar, digital dog or cat, that is, you just interact, the older adult who's potentially mostly living alone, or maybe post-surgery or so forth, and they have, like, they build a relationship with this digital pet, but behind the scenes, that pet is being controlled. The conversation is being controlled by a certified health coach, and it's clinical grade conversation. So if it's managing diabetes or a chronic condition, or it's just a wellness check. So a lot of people were out there saying, no way are people going to develop a relationship with a virtual digital pet. And there's no way you can have clinical grade conversations. Well, au contraire, like, they're having amazing results. And after the pilot, and they said, okay, we're going to take this away, the folks at home were like, no, you're not, and also it requires some video and audio connection into the home. And so we are really talking a lot about privacy, and all of those very important topics that we need to have some very strong, regulatory, constraints around, and some best practices. Because in order to deliver some of these products into the home, we do need to make sure that we are following rigorous guidelines as well.
Hi, everyone. I've been behind the scenes just popping in. Abbie popped out for a few, and she is right back, so I will add her in. But for everyone that is ever on the comment section that's wondering who Abbie and Steve are talking to, it is me. And let me bring Abbie back in.
Wow. I'm so sorry about that. I just got bumped out somehow. So I apologize for that. Thank you, Jada, for stepping in. Stuff happens on Tech Tuesday, right?
Hey, tech happens, right? It's fine.
There you go. And you were talking about the pets, so about Care Coach, and where did I leave off?
Yeah. Oh, so right. And so with Care Coach, so what that is a great signal to say that, well, like, yes, like older adults could develop, relationships with digital avatars. And, we're talking a lot about robotics as digital companions, and ways to, as we talked about, the staffing shortages, and, how do we fill the time? There's a lot of solutions out there, like Rendeavor, the VR experience, right? A lot of folks might have said, like, wearing a VR headset would be disorienting for older adults, and they wouldn't really take to it. Well, turns out they love it when the content is engaging. And then after they take off the headsets, they now have a shared experience with their peer group. They've got something to talk about. So it goes back to blending high touch with high tech, and making sure that there's just a value for the user. Another example that I love is a company called Familio.
Okay. Yeah.
And so is this okay that we're dropping in some names here? Because to me, they just represent, like, what's possible, right? So, so Familio is a company out of France, and they're in a lot of senior living in France. And what it is, it's a family gazette. So you've got folks, like big family members or big wide circles of friends who throughout the week could just text in a little snippet about their life, or there's pictures or some update. And Familio gets it all put together, and the senior living operator simply presses a button, and then it gets printed out into this gazette, and then they can hand it out to all the residents, in their place. And now there's what Familio calls it, it's called, like, proofs of love, right? So now it's this family update, and you've got something to hang on to for the week and read it, but it also becomes like like an icebreaker with caregivers who are come to visit. It becomes something that if somebody is kind of experience a little bit of sadness or maybe agitation, you can have like this stack of family gazettes. It reminds them that they're loved. But it also makes the visits from the family members a little more energizing when they do come, because they have more of a relationship now.
Yeah.
And now they're posting activities from inside the senior living back out to the family, so the family knows what's going on with mom or dad while they're in there. So like it's just a beautiful way to broker family connections that's using technology behind the scenes.
I love it. I love it. That is great. It's so helpful to hear about these things, to know what is coming down the pipeline. And where do you go for your resources and to find out about new technology?
Wow, I go everywhere. I go everywhere because innovators love solving wicked problems with the upside potential to change the world, right? And so ideas could come from any sector at any time. In fact, we're going to be meeting with a hologram company in a couple of days, right? That's doing like desktop holograms. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, could you just imagine like if we had these at scale during lockdown? Right. So like a literal hologram image of your family members, like for folks who were in senior living and they couldn't, you just couldn't open the doors to people. But like the hologram is like, so it looks so lifelike. And what about telehealth visits that now could be much more precise from a, healthcare standing? So, here's this like hologram that's maybe designed for entertainment and retail. But, when you think about it in context of, older adults and aging, like it starts to really solve some really important issues and also create new possibilities.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm reading popular mechanics, I'm reading design guides, I'm reading deep research coming out of universities. That's the source, that's the ground truth. A lot of AI adoption now, a lot of, again, psychology, behavioral sciences around decision making. Because you can design something, but if somebody just isn't in the mindset to use it or enjoy it, it's just, so I read a lot about what's going on in CMS and Medicare, Medicaid, and Medicare Advantage programs, because with the economics changing, right? So it's value-based care. Well, what do you need to do from an innovation standpoint to really prove the ROI, right?
Yeah.
So it's a complicated world out there, which is why I'm loving the work that's going on with the Age Tech Collaborative, with AARP, because bringing all the stakeholders from different parts of the ecosystem together, that's where we could really be honest with each other and say, here are my unmet needs. Here's a qualified lead. Here's what works. Here's what doesn't. And here's how we can pay for it. And oh, by the way, I'm willing to pay for it, but you got to help me on the training side. You got to help me integrate it into my infrastructure. You got to help me operate it and support it. Otherwise, I can't buy it. So, but we just need a lot more information sharing so that we could get more products and services out there into the hands of people who need them and will love them.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear from you today. And to my mind's just been brought in terms of everything that you talked about. And I'm just impressed. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, great. Well, I'd love to hear from everybody. So I think my LinkedIn, Jade, if you wouldn't mind popping my LinkedIn profile up there, there you go. That's the best way to reach me. I do a lot of work with the Age Tech Collaborative, my own organization agency. We have co-working space at a couple of at the Cambridge Innovation Centers around the world, where startups and large enterprises can co-work together. So I would love to hear from you, and I'd really love to hear from folks who would be interested in piloting some of these technologies, because that's how we're going to get some of this, again, this field truth.
Yeah.
And Abbie, thank you for doing this work and for being an advocate for everybody in senior living, residents, and owners, operators, administrators, everybody, because we need community to feel very empowered at this stage in our lives. And so thank you for the work that you're doing and sharing all this good work.
Well, I love working with my clients. I absolutely adore them. I love them, and I advocate for them all the time. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, they're older. They don't need that." But you know what? They have a strong desire to connect with family and friends. And if they can do that by understanding their technology, great, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I run a company, an organization called the Founders Over 55 group. So it's a volunteer group. So we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs, 55, 60, 70 years old saying, you know what, I want to get out there and, just do my life's passion, and be in a growth mindset and connect. So we're busting myths every day, right? About the wants and needs of older adults. Like we're busting. I just saw a video today of an ice dancing pair. They're fabulous. And they're 66 years old and they both just had like hip replacement surgeries, but they're doing the spins, the lifts, the spins. So we're all living longer. We want to live, as we say, we want to live until we die. Like, right. So like, let's just make it the best that we can.
Awesome. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Tech Tuesday. And I want to thank our sponsors again for sponsoring the show. The show is brought to us by Fynn.io. It's a comprehensive senior living platform that's going to increase your return on investment as well as your NOI. Learn more at Fynn.io. And for all of you that were with us today in the audience, thank you. Thank you, Jada, for popping in there, and Danielle for dealing with the tech. And we'll see you right back here next week.